Thank you. So good evening, everyone from India who's joined in. And of course, very, very good morning to you, Peter. He was just sharing, who's based in Orlando in Florida. And thank you so much, Peter, for making this time to engage with all the people who joined in. We've had 50 registrations for this program, and I'm sure that they will trickle in as they do. And if not, we'd be happy to share the recording with them. But there's nothing like being live with you and hearing you firsthand. So kudos to all who've been here on time and honoring that. We'll get started. But it means a lot to me, like you know, Peter, to have you here, to work with you and engage in a manner that I have benefited hugely from. And I'm sure that all of you on this call, just by experiencing Peter's presence here today, will definitely benefit too. So I'd just like to say welcome to all the prospective coaches as well who've logged on. And I can say with great comfort, I know you at different levels, some more closely than the others. Some I've interacted with you personally for many, many years. Some maybe just over WhatsApp messages, but I definitely know each one of you in some way or the other. And it's just a few housekeeping rules. Thank you all who've honored my request and put your camera on so we can have that visual appeal. I love to say that the work that we do and the way that we engage with each other, the energy will definitely ensure the bandwidth doesn't go away. There's so much energy that gets generated in this room. And if you wish to keep your camera off for any other reason, we'll absolutely honor that as well. We'll keep ourselves on mute. Welcome. Snehan, we'll keep ourselves on mute primarily so that we're recording this session. There are no background noises to it. And all of you have sent in so many different questions that I've tried to interweave as a story together to make it interesting. And I'll moderate this discussion with Peter. And if we have time in the end, we'll just open it out for anyone to just pop and ask any question that still is in their mind that they'd like to, ask from Peter. So to set the context, the idea of this open house, beyond experiencing Peter's presence, is also to support you to take a decision as to whether you'd like to join our learning cohort in April. That starts from the 7th to the 11th. We still have 7 seats now left in that cohort. And if you decide, no, not this time, maybe some other time, then whenever you feel ready, just know that we're always ready, welcome, and welcome you into this space that really I hold is a space of great joy, and it's a journey of personal mastery. Of course, you'll be certified as coaches and all. Oh, good to see you, Lena. So happy to see you after so long. Good to see you. Glad you could make it. Super. So let me bring my focus and attention now to my mentor who's taught me everything about coaching and who, at least in my perspective, as he always corrects me, is one of the founding fathers of coaching, for me at least. Of course, he's been there for so long since, he's seen the profession really come together 26 years ago. And he has also been instrumental in, bringing this whole, the ICF, or the International Coach Federation, the umbrella under which we all come together. He's been one of those founding members of that as well. And so to me, like I say, he is really the founding father of coaching for me. You can choose to take it or not, but that's really how I hold him. And before I move and hand it over to Peter to introduce himself and say a few words, I just I know that you've been coming to India now for as 14 years, and as I have seen it, there are many people who train in India, but the consistency with which you've been coming here in person and now virtually, and I think that you'd be one of those master certified coaches, but most special, who have trained at over 750 now coaches within the Indian context itself. Forget the global presence and all the other work that you do across the world, but at least in India and bringing it back home, that's really how I see. So I'm just going to invite you in Peter, to share a little bit about how you see coaching from when it began to where it is today, and introduce yourself a little bit beyond which I have already shared with everyone in multiple emails. But over to you to really set the stage, and then we'll get started.
Thank you. Thank you, wonderful Amrita. Wow. Well, to not be very long, I've been a master coach, master certified coach. I was one of the first ones in the ICF to receive that honor, that privilege, that honorific. And back in, I think, when they first started putting credentials together in like 1999, I think it was. So it's been a while, and I've been training for 25 years. As Amrita says, I've been coming to India physically since 2009, and love the work that I get to do in India. It's been very special for me, and the evolution of coaching in India specifically has been spectacular. When I first started coming in 2009, it was like, okay, so what is coaching, and isn't it like mentoring? And I've already been coaching for the last 6 years, so why do I need training? And by the second day of training, they go, "Oh, what I was doing was not coaching. What I was doing was training, mentoring, leading, teaching, consulting, etc." So the evolution of even the concept of a professional coach, whether it's an external coach or an internal coach in India, has gone up exponentially in the time that I've been traveling and doing the work that I have done with in India. The world of coaching for the last 25 years has also spectacularly taken root now. It's it's like, the first 10 years is proof of concept. It's not a fad type of thing worldwide. Now it is being integrated into organizational culture. It's been used extensively in civic bureaucracies around the world, in governmental agencies, military agencies, etc., and has now become part of, how do I as an educator bring coaching skills into that? How am I as a leader in the development work that I do with my direct reports or my high potentials? How do I bring coaching into that work, etc.? So it in many respects, starting 7.5 billion people on the planet, and my guess is less than 5% of them impacted by coaching.
Peter,
So
I'm just going to interrupt for a minute because now you're back. You're frozen for a bit. Now you're back.
yeah, I'm seeing a thing on my screen that says my internet is unstable. So that might have been it.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a great time to become a coach, whether you're going to be using it as a skill set, mindset, as a profession, when you retire, or in the work you're doing in HR or L&D or leadership role, or with your family members. It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And so I'll stop there. I know there's a whole bunch of other things I could go into here, Amrita, because I get all excited about it.
Yeah.
I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. It also ties in quite beautifully from what you shared in a question that came from Nishchala Murthy, and her question is that um, how do I how being a coach can be beneficial both at the level of coaching as a profession, but also in an individual person's life as such, not just from a career and as a profession of coaching. So if you could speak a little bit to that, I think it would be quite cool.
Yeah. Um, our approach at For Life Institute has always been one from a very spiritual standpoint. And that starts for me in terms of the internal individual. Who am I created to be? Like who's the most powerful, authentic Peter Redding regardless of what he's doing in life, whether he's an executive, or whether he's a woodworker, whether he's a coach, whether he's a spouse, whether he's a brother or a son, as a human being. And so that's the starting point. And so to learn coaching at that core level benefits the individual regardless of what you do with it, regardless of what stage of life you're in, regardless of what role you're in, or the different roles that you are playing right now, and will maybe more for change over time. This is work that stays with the students that have come through our training. It just does. And for doing it for 25 years, the last virtual class that we just did here in the U.S., I actually had a granddaughter of a graduate of ours back from 2000, and the grandmother remembered the training, encouraged her granddaughter to take the training for her own personal evolution, even if she didn't want to become a coach, because it wasn't clear that she wanted to become a coach. And so that's how long it stays. It stays with people for their lifetime. There's principles that we teach that you experience in the 5 days, whether it's in person or virtually, that will stick with you for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, guaranteed. It's because we basically remind people of who they really were at birth. So we do lots of discovery processes, and I really call them rediscovery processes, because it's coming back to source, to use a famous name of an organization there in India. It is literally coming back to source, however you define that, and to then live up to that, live congruently with that, the endowments that came from that place. So again, I could talk about that, and I do talk about that for 5 days straight, and you'll experience that. So yes, I'll give you one other short story that just comes to mind right now. There was a nurse that came through our program back many, many years ago, and she happened to be a neonatal nurse. So she's a nurse that works with little beings that literally can rest in one's hand. They're so small, and they need special care, not so much medical care as much as protection and nutrition. And I had a conversation with her probably 6 or 8 years after she had done the program. I said, why did you come to Coach for Life, and did you get anything out of it, and how has it impacted you, and if it has impacted you at all? And she said, Peter, it's probably the most significant training I ever got, because obviously we're not asking questions of the neonate, the precious baby, but every single day I have parents, I have siblings, I have grandparents that come in to see this precious being. And it's given me so much confidence to be able to ask them questions, hold a space for them, hold a sacred space is what we call it, a sacred space for them, to be able to process, to love, to communicate with each other in the family unit, as well as with me and my other staff in the neonatal care facility. And it struck me again as this is a communications model. Coaching, philosophy of coaching worldwide, globally, regardless of where you end up with your training, you'll learn better communication skills, better listening skills, better questioning skills, better skills to be in presence with that person that you're speaking with or you're with right now. So it's stunningly deep and stunningly sticky. It'll stay with you.
Undoubtedly, it's both the grandmother and granddaughter story that you shared and the nurse just reinforces what I said earlier, that you are the founding father of coaching, no doubt about
Thank you for that.
it. And Peter, I've always shared, like, yes, the program that we run it's one of the first one of the first few, I'd say, ICF certified accredited programs in coaching globally. And yes, the certification is what you definitely will get, but it's really a gift that you choose to give yourself of personal mastery, and that's really, I think, that creates that sense of stickiness, creates that sense of reconnection, and I really think that's the gift of coaching that we give ourselves before we can take it out to the world. So thank you really for bringing this work to my life and to the lives of so many across the world, Peter. Uh,
Thank you.
and on a similar note of this personal mastery and work, and because the let's say the landscape in which coaching is really used, and all my work that I do is also in the corporate sector, is when we talk about life coaching and leadership coaching, it's is it the same thing? Is it not the same thing? Can a person be different at work and different elsewhere? What's your perspective? And if you can share a bit about that. Peter will be back, and I'll tell you what my take on it is till the master comes back. Is really that I always say this, is that I cannot imagine a leader who doesn't have a life, and I can't imagine somebody who's in your life if you're not leading it the way that you want to. So I really don't hold those two as different. They're just two different ways of approaching, two different ways of labeling ourselves in terms of how we engage and the services that we offer. But life and leadership coaching to me is really identical. It's two sides of the same coin. It's how you use it, how you bring it to life, is where the pure joy, the fulfillment of it comes through. So Peter seems to have logged off from an internet connection, and we thought the internet goes off only in India, but good to see that it goes off in the US as well. And I'm sure he's going to be back really soon. But if there's someone who wants to chime in on anything that we've said so far, any thoughts that come up, please feel free to just jump in.
Amrita, I have a question. Once we undergo this training, plus the 20 hours and then the 100 hours of coaching that one needs to do before you kind of then finally appear for the certification. And let's assume we get certified. Does your organization kind of also help connect us to corporates that need coaching? Is there any sort of facilitation that you do there as well, or is it limited to training and certification?
So I'll answer that, Jesse, in two ways. One is that there is no. I mean, it's not linked that you do this program and we will support you to get your clients or get
Sure.
within the corporates, open doors within corporates. I can't say that the two are linked at all, quite clearly. And I'd say that is that coach education is one vertical that we run at Back to Source. We do a lot of work within the space of corporate workshops and coaching within the corporate context. And we are, three of us actively engaged. Vidhi and me more so, but we have Monica who does the back end, and I have another person who comes on, Priyanka, who's also another coach. All coaches who we work very collaboratively with each other. But sometimes the project requires us to get 60 coaches or coach 60 different people, and four of us can't coach all 60 people. And so then the place that we go back to is our same pool of people who've been trained, because that's the methodology that we trust. That's the methodology that we can ensure offers that consistent experience for a client. So we go back to the pool, and then it's always the client's choice, always the client's choice in terms of who they choose, because it's ultimately it's a partnership that has to work both for me as a coach and for the client. So they may not even choose me, even though I may have made the introduction into that company, because the chemistry doesn't work. And they may choose somebody else from that pool of coaches. And that is something that we honor and hold very sacred in not assigning people that, okay, I think this person will work really well for you, but give them at least 3 or 4 conversations to have, and then they select the person they want to work with. So opportunities do come up, but that's not a guarantee, and that's not a rider to the program that we offer.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a long answer to your simple question.
No, that helps. Thank you.
Super. All right.
Amrita, can you hear me?
Yes, Peter, you're back. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And we were on life and leadership coaching, and I gave my take on it. Back to you to share yours.
Yeah, thank you. For me, no matter what role that you're in, if you're in a leader or not a leadership role, you'll always be alive. So life has a lot to do with whatever I'm doing. The people initially, when I came to India, there was we called it the life the certified life coach program, right? And there were so many executives that came back at the end of that and said, this is the most significant thing that I've had in any kind of leadership training. Can I call myself a leadership coach? And I said, yeah, absolutely. You can call yourself whatever you want. But I went back to the International Coaching Federation and said, can I change or modify my program's name to Life and Leadership Coach Training Program? And they said, absolutely. So there are, we talk about coaching on a universal level. It's really how you want to apply it. So we have hospice coaches. We have university support coaches. We have life coaches. We have entrepreneurial coaches. I mean, there's a whole range of titles that a coach can take on and use this model and this coaching training as their basis, and they do. Again, like I said, I've been doing this for a very long time, probably 5,000 people overall worldwide that I've coached or trained since I began this in 1996. So it is the foundation of however you want to coach and whatever you end up calling yourself or naming yourself in terms of your coaching. It is 100% applicable. So specifically relative to leadership and how this supports is how can you develop your people faster, easier, and in a more honoring manner. So there's been a pendulum that has shifted over my lifetime in my corporate world from telling people what to do and what they needed to develop to listening to what they're interested in. And now further, the scale has gone into coaching of creating a space for them to figure it out for themselves. So you end up having leaders that are younger. You have leaders that are more prepared to make their own decisions and figuring out things for themselves. And all of that comes from coaching. So you see a lot of universities now, business schools, psychology programs offering professional ICF coach training because it is such an important philosophy for the young individual to come into, to be able to do that from the very first leadership assignment that they may have in their organization, profit, nonprofit, NGO, governmental, doesn't matter. And it's one of the reasons why the International Coaching Federation changed their name from International Coach Federation, having to focus strictly on the coach, like me and Amrita here, right? And Nidhi, to International Coaching Federation, because we have seen the enculturation of the coaching mindset moving into all of society at all levels. And like I say, I think we're at the very beginning of what coaching is all about, starting with 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that there's this big wave, of that everyone wants to ride on. And if you look at LinkedIn and you see the designations on LinkedIn, coach, consultant, mentor is like the most used designation that I've at least seen people like just keep adding on to their descriptions. And it seems like a rather crowded market in India. In India, I see both for the demand of coaches as well as the supply of coaches both. And I'm sure it's similar across the world. And Sandeep Ravani, who I know will listen into this call, he mentioned he can't be here. He said he had a very basic question. In this crowded market, how does one really build a career as a coach if that's what one wants to go ahead and do?
The first step is to be confident that you're actually coaching. Like you say, LinkedIn has, everybody's a coach now. I saw a hair growth coach literally last night as I was going through my LinkedIn stuff. It's like a hair growth coach. Now that's interesting. I'm not sure how that is holding a space for somebody else to figure out how to grow their hair, but okay. So it has become very popular to call yourself a coach. The distinction, and I take this one very seriously, is, are you a professional coach? And you can't be a professional coach if you just continue to do what you've been doing as a leader, as a trainer, as a consultant, as an advisor, as a therapist, and so on, because you haven't gone through the process of changing your mindset and how you approach that person in front of you or that group of people in front of you. It used to take about a year to do that. How do I stop? It's the old classic thing. What do I have to unlearn in order to learn? How do I have to open up my mind to a different way, a different approach to support people for their own growth? So the idea of the coaching business, how do I practice this? How do I hang my shingle and say, yes, I'm a professional coach. I'm a professionally trained coach. I'm a professional certified coach, is to get the training and the knowledge base to understand and be able to speak to people. What are the core competencies? Do you know the 62 core competencies or you don't? Can you practice those core competencies when you're in front of an individual in a professional coaching relationship or not? Do you know the ICF ethics? Do you know the 28 different components that go into what do I need to be aware of as a professional coach? Because this is serious business. This isn't just a hobby. This is serious business if you want to take on and become a professional coach and go out there. And what assignments will you accept based on those ethics as a professional coach, and which ones will you not? Again, very serious business. So have that foundational training and practice that comes with the training. The second part in terms of is who are you here to coach? I say in the training in our part 2, who's your ideal client? Who are you most qualified to coach? Not that you're going to be training them, not that you're not going to be teaching them, you're not going to be telling them, but the chemistry that Amrita has talked about is incredibly serious. Is there a chemistry between you and your potential client group? We call it affinity group at Coach for Life, affinity group. So while the model can be universally applied to any group that has come up in my consciousness in 25 years, it doesn't mean that you are going to or have to coach people from all walks of life, all genders, all personalities, all the way that, but whoever they are. So to identify, and we do this work in part 2, once you get the foundation in part 1, is who do I want to coach? Who am I excited to coach? Who gets here's 2 questions that I ask myself. This is a very cool questions that came up for me about 10 years ago. Who am I most passionate to work with? And if you answer that question, you'll narrow it down to, maybe 1 million people worldwide. And that's who you'll be communicating with. That's who you'll be attracting. That's who you want to be in front of, however you want to do that. The second question is, who's ready to get my best work? Who's ready to get my best work? So I used to coach entrepreneurs. I still have a soft space in my heart for entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurs. I are an entrepreneur. I've been around entrepreneurs all my life. But did they now get my best work as a coach? And the answer to that is no. Even though I can do that brilliantly, spectacularly, they'll get a huge value out of it. But the people that get my best work now as their coach are world-changing visionaries. That's the level of people that I want to work with, and they're the people that get my best work as a coach. So the question for you is, who is ready out there in your affinity group to get your best work as a professional coach? And if you can figure that out, and we can support you during that, during part 2, we go into that with more depth. How do you introduce yourself? What kind of special tools will you create in part 2 to attract those people so that they know that, oh, wow, you really know my world. You know my issues. You know my trepidations. You know my challenges. You know my aspirations. I want to work with you. And your group is going to be different than my group, then is different than Amrita's group, and then is different than the person in the next, virtual seat next to you. So those are the beginning stages of putting yourself out there as a professional coach. And I think once you understand that, yep, I'm a confident, I can coach, people getting value from me by me not telling them what to do, and you know who you're going to coach, then you're going to start attracting those kinds of people, and you're going to love it, and they're going to love you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to share with everyone, what Peter just shared is that the program that you're considering is this part 1 and part 2 that Peter was talking about. So part 1 is the 5 days, intensive, immersive, online, live program that Peter and I passionately facilitate, and where you get grounded in the essence of the philosophy, the mindset, and all of the great stuff that has come through Peter and to me and through us to you. And it's just that transference of our experience, knowledge, and understanding of coaching. You get all of that experientially in those 5 days. And then part 2 of the program, which is the weekly webinars, for 9 webinars every Wednesday evening, is where you get to figure out what is your affinity group, how do you engage with them, how do you contract, and more the business of coaching. And that's the whole part 1 and part 2 of the program that you're considering. Just wanted to share that for people, as Peter was sharing about part 1 and part 2.
Thank you.
I also, I have shared with everyone I've spoken to, and with great pride, in fact, that the program that we offer is a spiritual-based coaching program. In fact, for me, that's the single most reason why I find this work so meaningful personally. And I've shared my perspective to everyone I've spoken to, with great enthusiasm. And yet it continues to raise a number of questions around spirituality, coaching. Is it religious? Is it practical? And so, I'm going to, invite you to take a deep dive into the area that I enjoy so much, and for you to share really and what this whole spiritual based coaching program is. And friends, I'd say that is one of the key differentiators in terms of the program, because all the programs that are offered by ICF, I will say, cover all these competencies and are great. And if it resonates with you in terms of the philosophy that we engage with, and as Peter will share about the spiritual based coaching program, I really think that's where the heart of all our work lies, or soul of all our work lies. To you, Peter, to just share a bit on that.
Thank you. Yeah. To answer some very specific questions, we are not religious. I've had, I think, all the major that I'm aware of, faith traditions, religious traditions, people that are devout, blank, be part of our program at some point in time or another over the last 25 years. No one's ever come up to me and say, you are blaspheming my belief system around, my God, my deity. my deities. That's never happened. And quite the reverse. We have reintroduced a lot of people back to their original faith-based upbringing and said, you know, I've gotten away from that, and I think I want to go back to, and again, I'm not a missionary. I don't try to convert anybody to anything. So the basic core belief is that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. I mean, that's just fundamentally my belief and what goes into the coaching model that we teach you, which is the fulfillment coaching model. The other component of that is when we started this training, started offering this training back in the end of 1995, beginning of 1996. Coaching was just an embryo. It was just a very nascent, maybe a year old, quite literally about a year old, when we came into the coaching profession and coach training arena. Again, it's Spirit's guidance, by the way. Marcia is the co-founder of Coach for Life, and myself, we're very spiritual. And there was a sense of being guided to start a training company. Our first reaction to that is, I don't think so. And the guidance was along the lines of the one common denominator of this 8 companies, the 8 training programs that I was familiar with at that point in time in 1995, 1996, was that coaching is for healthy people that take responsibility for their own life. We're not training people to be therapists and, you know, to go backwards and figure out where they were victimized. And the common denominator for all of that was healthy people have the capacity to access the right answer for themselves. Now, a couple of the models that were popular back in 1996 was a male and female model. The male model was just figure it out. What do you want to do? Put a chart in front of you in terms of the steps, a milestone chart or what have you, a PERT chart, and then follow up with your coach and make sure that you're doing that. It's like, just do it, right? Very masculine. The other model was more of a feminine model and said, well, the body has cellular wisdom. We have learned and stored wisdom in our cellular system, our physical bodies. And if we can hold a space for the client to access that cellular wisdom, that will be a guidance for them to figure out what's next for them, right? And both still exist. Those models still exist in many, many, many coach trainings around the world. Because Marcia and I were quite spiritual, again, not particularly religious, but we had a sense of that there was a God. There was a affirming, guiding force out there somewhere, energetically or ethereally. I can't necessarily know what that is, but there was a sense that I'm connected somehow, some way. We said, okay, so if coaching is about the client has their own best answer, then if we go to the brain and figure it out from that masculine model, I don't care how smart you are, it's finite. If you access the cellular wisdom of your body, that too is finite based on your experiences and what you have absorbed over lifetimes of experiences. But what if we had this? What if we had the coach, and what if we supported the client to connect with their sense of the divine? Or, as Amrita talks about, your sense of source, original source, infinite source. Now we're dealing with an infinite possibility that can come streaming into the relationship between coach and client. By doing that, we support an individual to move away from their myopic or channeled view of what's possible or who they are in this planet, and open it up to an infinite level of possibilities. Now, while that sounds very, very kind of theoretical, it is amazingly powerful. And we do that through our coaching model and the discovery process that we go through, because we bypass the linear brain. We bypass the physicality of the individual, and we access, instead of assess, we access their innermost, and you can call it whatever you want, soul, knowingness, inner guidance, divine inspiration or connection to who they were created to be by their creator. Again, however they hold that. Now, the coach that we train that goes back into organizations that will not allow conversations around spirituality. And in the United States, we have absolutely, by our Declaration of Independence, a separation of church and state. Okay. So educators in this country cannot go back into their classroom and offer prayer. Right? The Supreme Court back in the 70s or 60s, I think, said, stop it. You can't do that, because now you're becoming a missionary, or you're trying to convert people to this, that, or the other. In India, the pushback has been, well, in the corporate arena, I can't speak about spirituality. It's either forbidden, or it's makes everybody nervous, or what have you. I got it. I was in that same corporate world myself, not in India, but in the United States and Japan and Canada and Europe. All the corporate work that I did worldwide, which included huge time in Asia, living in Japan for 4.5 years and traveling extensively. So the vocabulary that we use within the same spiritual model is congruent with corporate speak, corporate language, corporate familiarity. So if I use the word purpose in corporate, they love that. Oh, yeah. If I use the word values in corporate, they love that. If I use the word core strengths or skills, they go, well, yeah, we want our people to, well, I want to know their core strengths and utilize those and develop those. And so that's what we do. Every individual client that I'm with, whether they're a corporate person or an educator here in the United States, or candlestick maker, doesn't matter. I will ask them, do you have a sense of a divine presence in your life? Yes or no? Okay, so 99.9% of the people that I've coached personally, which is probably over 300 people now, 99.9% of them said yes. One guy said no. I said, okay. So I said, the ones that say yes, I said, so what's your name for that deity, for that divine presence? And it's Jesus, it's God, it's Spirit, it's Yahweh, it's Buddha, it's whatever it is for that individual in their spiritual tradition. And so I use that from there on out. I don't use, I use Spirit. Okay, Spirit speaks to me. I'm connected to Spirit. But I don't use that terminology if they've told me they use the word Jesus. That's their deity. That's their God. It could be Mother, Father, Earth. It could be whatever they choose to name it. The second question I ask them is, how do you honor that? Or how do you reconnect with that when you need that access, that divine wisdom? And so they tell me, I relax, I meditate, I do yoga, I walk in nature, I hug my kids, I look at my granddaughter's picture on my desk, whatever that might be, to reconnect with that sense of the divine. Now, the person that said to me, I don't believe in God, and I forget, frankly, in a moment if they're agnostic or atheist, but that's irrelevant. So what I said for him, I said, okay, so if you are really stuck and you want to have an answer that's really, really important to your life or to someone that you love, how do you connect with that to get an answer? Oh, he said, oh, that's easy, Peter. I close my eyes. I take a couple of deep breaths and I move down to my gut and access my gut for what's right. It may not be logical, but it's the right answer for me. I said, okay, fantastic. So I coached that individual for over a year. I never used the word God. I never used the word, never got into spirituality. And whenever he was stuck, I would bring him back to, okay, so I'm just going to ask you to close your eyes, take a couple of relaxing breaths. And I want you to ask your gut, what's the right way for you? And so in my notes for that particular client, I use gut, where I would normally put the name of the divine's, name for that particular client. And I use gut, capital G-U-T. So the model is universal. And like I say, we have had people from all the major religions and spiritual traditions that I'm aware of, from a Orthodox Jewish person to born-again Christians to Hindi to Muslim to Shinto. I mean, just all the ones that I'm aware of. There's probably others that I'm not aware of. But I want to honor their connection their way. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Peter. And one of my quests is really to raise that consciousness and see the flowering of human consciousness within the corporate context, and take spirituality into the boardroom. And I feel so comfortable to be able to do that from everything that I've learned with you, without ever having to really say the word spirituality at all. And that's what I say also to many people who call in, is that it's, you take spirituality away, and I'll say from Coach for Life or back to source, and we'll fall flat on our face. But we don't ever use that, allow that to, that's on the vocabulary with which we engage with our clients. That's the essence of who we are and what we bring to the work. I'm some of these questions that come in, I find it, I wish I could like type on the answer and send it back to them itself, but I thought I'll just bring it here and ask it just as it is, because it'll be difficult to even get it out of my mouth in any other which way. But this question is really from Maninder, and he says, can you share what you mean by spiritual based coaching, which you've already just shared, and do people actually see value in it? And are they willing to pay for it? Or is it only best offered in a pro bono capacity, given that it is spiritually oriented? It'll be interesting, for you to just say a little bit about that. Though I can say from my experience that definitely people pay for it, and they pay really well, and forget the fee and everything else around the money. What's most gratifying for me is that people are waiting for this work. There's such a deep yearning for it. Especially in the corporate context. And I really think that it's a privilege to take it. But I'll zip it and wait for Peter to respond to it.
Well, yeah, it's if I go back in my life and my career, at 37 years old, I was a corporate animal, and I was a great corporate animal. They rewarded me handsomely. I skipped levels of advancement and promotion. And if I was listening to myself now, if I had that future connection to Peter Redding that you see on the screen right now at 37, I'd say, what the hell is he talking about? So part of what I've learned on my own journey is that people will not and almost cannot articulate what they don't know or what they've forgotten, especially around a sense of spirituality or a deeper connection with all that is. Okay, however they might articulate that. Here's the secret, is that in coaching, my client falls back in love with themselves, their authentic self, their core self. Not their persona self, not their mask. Okay, when I'm on my core job, I have a corporate mask, right? When I'm back with my family, then I have a parental mask. When I'm talking with my mother-in-law, I have my toleration mask. Okay, and so on. So we have all these artificial masks that doesn't allow the authenticity to come through. And that's the most powerful place for an individual to come from, regardless of what they're up to. If they're having a tough conversation with mother-in-law, if they're having a tough conversation with a direct report, they're having a tough conversation with their teenage daughter. Because every time I'm not authentic, the other individual knows it. They can sense it. Every human being can sense that someone's not being authentic. When I am authentic, I am an incredibly powerful human being. And when I'm connected to my sense of source, when I'm connected to my sense of the divine, I'm doing the work that I'm here to do. And that literally feels good inside of me. I can, it's like, yes. I can be exhausted. It doesn't make the life any easier, by the way, but it makes it a hell of a lot more rewarding. Like, yes, I did my work today. I showed up and I contributed what I need to contribute for my world that I touch around me. For some people, it's their immediate family. It might be just one other human being on a planet that you're here for. Or it might be millions of people because of the work that you do in your organization that directly or indirectly touches them. You will not here's a one of my favorite quotes is from me. You'll never go wrong being your authentic self. You will never go wrong by being your authentic self or showing up as your authentic self. Now to the thing of being paid for that. Yeah, you bet. People pay for authenticness. I know that there's sort of a historical thing, particularly in India, that, oh no, anything spiritual is a pro bono situation. I go to work and I earn money, but I go over here and do my philanthropy, and that's pro bono. I give that away, and that's my way of giving back. That's my tithing. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I also do a lot of that myself, but I get paid very, very well to be a professional coach. And people will recognize that, and they are starving for it. The world is starving for that right now. So yeah, it's not even a question anymore for me.
Neither for me either, Peter. Thank you. And thank you for still answering it. So I'm going to stay on the same thread of coaching within the organizational context. And there's Prikshaya who would want to understand how do you create impact through coaching? More specifically, she says, is that leaders always have stakeholders watching them. So should they highlight the fact that they have a coach, or should they hide it? Or how do you engage with this whole coaching within the organizational context, and also this engaging of the sponsors or the CHRO or the other people in the ecosystem of coaching? How do you engage with that?
Yeah. Okay. So number one, coaching is generative. Coaching is not trying to fix somebody or save somebody that's going downhill. It's not. It's not. What do I want to say? It's not the opposite of generative. It's not trying to, again, turn somebody into someone or not. So worldwide, coaching has been talked about, it's been studied, it's been written about in major publications worldwide. It talks about how powerful coaching is in terms of developing people. Proven, done that, been there, not a question anymore at all. For a lot of people, it's a perk. It's an advantage to have a professional coach. And so they will sometimes even put it on their resume. I have been coached by a professional coach in terms of my leadership development. I've seen it. In terms of the ecosystem of the individual around them, in terms of how that works, the while the coach and the client have a sacred, confidential relationship between the two of them, the individual that I'm coaching within an organization has a superior, has peers, have subordinates, maybe external people that are interested in the development of that person, kind of like from afar, like the HR person is saying, I think she's going to be a great VP someday. We want to make sure I keep my eye on her and make sure that she gets the developmental work and the experiential work to take that role on probably 3 years from now, when we want to expand into Africa, or we want to expand into another part of India, or we want to expand our product line. So what we suggest and highly encourage is that when you get into a coaching engagement, especially an internal one within a corporation, is to make sure that the stakeholders, self-identified or otherwise, get involved with that relationship and monitor that relationship and give feedback, active feedback to the person that's being coached. Now, because of confidentiality, the coach will not and cannot divulge what the client is talking about, or the progress that the coach is assigning to that particular client. It is up to the client to do the communication, and it's up to the stakeholders to initiate inquiries back to their employee in this case. But don't ask the coach, okay, so is she making the proper progress? Is she working on communication skills? Is he working on, how to be less techie in his approach to, meetings and teamwork, and be more humanistic and bring in the EQ? And don't ask the coach that, because if he or she or they are a professional coach, they are ethically obligated to not answer that question. Okay, I'm going to say that again, because this is again, the early stages of coaching worldwide is like, well, yeah, but they're paying you. You have to tell them what's happening. There are a lot of non-professional coaches, non-trained coaches, non-ethical coaches that call themselves coaches. Well, of course, I'll tell you that. If you do that and you've labeled them as a coach within your organization, you will destroy be able to use coaching for the next 5 years, maybe even 10 years. And I've seen that as well. And that's not a pretty sight, because now you've just lost the number one valuable asset of developing people that exists in the world today. So there is ways of doing that. I'm going to put this one back on you, Amrita. You've done spectacular work in this arena of the ecosystem in terms of how to actively get them involved ahead of time, during a coaching engagement, and afterwards, in terms of measurements, in terms of communications, while still maintaining the confidentiality between coach and client. And so I applaud you for the work that you've done in India in that regard.
Thank you so much, Peter. And it's really stems from the conviction that you have instilled in me and I've experienced in the power of coaching, and not to belittle it, or not to have uh, this that coaching can fix every single thing. So it's coaching is a modality, and it's hugely supportive, it's very generative, and everyone involved in that ecosystem has a role to play. And so whilst my client is always the person I'm coaching, but I take great pride in involving everybody else of that ecosystem, and it's enjoyable, and it's really championing for my client itself. Sometimes I've had clients come back and tell me that I've worked in this organization for maybe 12 years, and I've never had such an open conversation with my reporting manager as I've had, as we've set the framework for coaching. And that's really purely holding and honoring the profession of coaching, really.
Agree. Totally agree with that.
I'm going to shift to gears, and I know we've been talking a lot about the corporate context, and I know there are many people also who are looking at coaching as an independent career completely, may not be within the corporate context. I know I've had some conversations with people who say, I just want to, support parents in terms of and how they engage with their children, and school leaders, and, and taking it forth over there. And in Maharashtra, which is the state that I'm from here in India, is that coaching has now become a mandate for government officials. So I definitely see that opening and growing, the canvas just expanding. But if you can talk about the beyond the corporate, how do you see coaching growing and being supportive to other aspects as well?
I think the best way to answer that is to see coaching, take the word coaching out of it, and just say, how can I communicate better with the people around me? And then look at the people around me. Are they children, my children, students, in grammar school or high school or university or postgraduate? Are they a nonprofit organization? Are they my place where I go to worship? Is it a neighborhood community? And look at this as a communications model. Then it opens up the field to anywhere and everywhere that you happen to be. If you're in a crowded bus, then that's your community for the next 30 minutes or the next hour and a half. If you are in a civic support group that's working with the kids on the street to get them better education, which again, some of our graduates have done that work literally. I know them personally that have worked with kids of the labor class, and they're not getting the education, that they are open up their homes to educate them, and they're using coaching skills to do that. So the other piece of it that comes out of this coaching training and the coaching model is the idea of not just the communication part, but how am I being with other people? Am I judgmental? Judgment shuts people down. It just does. It's like a turtle, kind of. So how can I be with other people that in a less judgmental manner? How can I support them and be a champion for them in terms of their journey, their personal journey, their educational journey, their career journey, their relationship journey? And again, we go back to the absolute fundamentals of coaching. Is there's a competency that says, I must be supportive of my client. There's no words in there that says you must be judgmental of your client. You must tell them where they're going wrong. That does not exist in any of the competencies. What does exist is how can I acknowledge them for what they've done well? How can I acknowledge them for their clarity? How can I ask them questions to get them to clarity? How can I not rush them? Because I want them to get it. The executive mindset is, when I was an executive, right? Executive mindset that I continue to see in the world, not just India, but everywhere, is, time is money. Let's get it. Let's get to it. Let's get to the bottom line. And if they're too slow in getting there, then I will push them to, okay, so just do this. All right. So we can't waste any more time. Let's just do this. Okay. So now you've just robbed them of an opportunity to grow. You've robbed them of an opportunity to take the authorship and the ownership of that choice for their life, their journey, their learning away from them. That you can apply to your kids. And so our students become better parents in 1 week. Guaranteed. I've seen it time and time and time again. And so regardless of your world, however you define that, whoever you interact with, you'll have better relationships with your aging parents, with your kids that are growing up faster than you realize, with your colleagues, with your neighbors. And you know what? Mostly for yourself. Wow. Can you imagine yourself being less judgmental about you? Woo! Now there's a concept. We could talk about that one for 5 days. Oh, we do. So yeah, I'm going to give you one story. It comes from India. Again, a fellow that was a very senior executive came into our training, part 1, part 2. I think he did also part 3, the certification piece, but I met with him probably 8 years after he had gone through the training. He said, Peter, I got to tell you a story. I said, great, I love stories. He said, well, my daughter came to me and said, Dad, can I talk to you as a coach, not my dad? And he thought about it because he realized that significant difference of, traditional dad, Indian dad, vis-a-vis a coach, modern day coach. And he said, yeah. And she said, I want to take up sports in my junior year. She was in the third year of high school. You call it what, level 11 or something like that. And he said, as a traditional dad, he said, absolutely not. This is a year where grades are paramount because of your placement in your next level of education. Categorically, no. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Right? Go do your homework. He said, as a coach, he said, I bit my tongue, literally. And he asked her some questions. Okay, so what's a passion? What do you want to get out of playing sports and being on a team and all of that? And it came out to an agreement between the two of them as coach and client now, not as dad and daughter, that as long as she had her grades, and she was studious, as properly studious, that he was going to say, yeah, go forward. And I think that's a great idea. Okay. Now, coach doesn't, that's still a sense of authority there, but they got through that and she went on to be on the team. And he said, what happened was just miraculous after that. He said she was voted the captain. She learned amazing life lessons in terms of being a leader. Okay. She aced all of her studies. And she got into her number 1 or number 2 chosen school at the end of that whole process. And he said that would never have happened before taking your coach training. Never. Because Indian dads absolutely categorically know what's best for their kids. And so it's not, you don't own that, by the way, all you Indian dads. American dads and European dads and South American dads and Canadian dads and Japanese dads are the same way. So this is a major shift of how am I with another human being, especially those that are really important to me, like my beautiful daughter, like my beautiful spouse, like my beautiful mom and dad, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Changes life in the best way possible.
I say on a lighter note, Peter, is like my daughter seeing the work that I do. She'll say, talk to me like I'm your client. Forget me being the coach. So I have to even, change the way I speak to her. So it's so permeates into the household as well, not just as a profession. But I'm going to take a pause here. And I did see that Lena said she has a question if time permits. And we do have some more questions that have come up, but I want to honor Lena's presence and get her to ask her question herself. I don't know what it is, but with you, Lena.
Okay. Super.
Okay, thanks, Amrita. I just emailed you actually. I was not sure how much time we have, but thank you so much. So I have 2 questions. Since I come from the organization setup and there was so much being discussed about organization, and honestly, I sit on the other side of the table when we are evaluating and discussing whether we want to do coaching. So the first aspect is that when as an organization we are evaluating whether we want to engage on a coaching journey for any individual, there is always a certain purpose in mind. It is never finally it's a commercial organization.
Sure.
And there will be either it's to assess whether the hypothesis that the potential of an individual, whether who we are calling potential, whether that individual has the potential or not, and to give a fair chance, or we have identified that an individual is a potential and hence to really transition him or her into the new role. So while we are maintaining, we were talking about confidentiality, or maybe I have not understood that aspect very clearly. If you ask me as a CHRO, my clear expectation when I engage with coaches is that okay, this is what this is the concern areas that I feel. There is a coaching journey certainly that can happen, and it's a journey. Nobody is expecting miracles. Either at the end of it, the hypothesis is tested finally that the individual is there, not there, or needs something more. That is what can happen. And finally, coaching, according to me, is to show a mirror. Finally, it's my choice if I'm getting coached, whether what I want to do with that mirror, what I'm seeing in that mirror,
because beyond that, I don't think anyone, if you ask me, is going to tell me that, okay, this is, Reena, you need to change this to get into the, to become a CEO. Whether I want to do that or not is up to me. So the question is that what the relationship between a coach and a coachee is very confidential, certainly. But as now I'm asking purely from a CHRO perspective. I expect that because a purpose was laid and objectives were laid, there is certain amount of feedback that comes from a coach as to what the coach feels, because that is a very critical aspect, where that individual is. So how does this really span out? Because there are no answers to this. It can, so what is, how has, how does that really span out in the real life? Because we are embarking on that journey, and your views on that and your experience on that is will be really insightful. That is one. Second question is that suppose if and Amrita and I have been engaging this for a few years now. Honestly, for paucity of time, I have never managed to go through this program. But for me, it is more like really evaluating, or rather understanding myself better. But tomorrow, but in my day-to-day life, I am a coach to so many people in the organization, and uh, if again, in your experience, if if a CHRO, a CEO, or any functional head, any head of a department becomes a coach after going through this program, is it an effective way of coaching, or do you feel that getting somebody from outside really makes that little difference, because we will bring in our own biases? So what is a more effective way? Because we are anyways coaching on a day-to-day basis. Yes, we are those untrained coaches, certainly. But if we go through this program, will we be able to bring in that effectiveness more, or an outside coach engaging with somebody who is a completely third party is a more effective model?
Well, two very powerful questions that are at the hearts and minds of, I think, every student that I've ever worked with, whether they're from India or not, frankly. The first one, you talk about the client objectives for the coaching engagement, or whatever professional development program you bring in for that individual, whether you send them off to a university course or some other training opportunity. The answer to that is that those objectives are talked about upfront with what we would call, you would be the sponsor, right? You're the one that's paying for it or organizing it, with the client that you have in mind, one of your employees or high potentials, and the coach. So the three of you will sit down, at least the three of you, and maybe their direct boss, their supervisor, superior. So there may be 3 or 4 of you in that room that say, here's what we wanted to achieve with you as getting coaching, professional coaching. And there needs to be agreement, and you need to communicate those things to the client, to your employee. Do not ask the coach to communicate, this is a tough one. He's been here for 15 years, 17 years. He's kind of, leveling out. He's not putting in the kind of effort that we expect from that level of person. Don't expect the coach to communicate that. You, as an organization, have the responsibility to communicate that to your employee. Now, once that's taken place, and that may take place in front of the coach, as so therefore, here are the 3 objectives, or the 3 expected results that we want at the end of the 6 months or a year that we're going to hire you to come in here and pay you big bucks, or a big rupee, or a big crore, as the case may be. And the coach, again, the professional coach is going to sit there and say, okay, so I'm hearing all of that, and it's not for me to agree to that. It's for the client to agree to that, your employee to agree to that. And once I engage into a coaching relationship, that client can talk about anything that they choose to that week. In 80% of the cases, historically, my experience, the client really wants to get better at A, B, and C, the 3 objectives that are laid out. They're also human beings, and so it's also going to be times during that engagement that the client's going to come into it, and the coach asks the question, what do you want to accomplish in our session today? And it's not going to be directly related to A, B, or C. It's going to be connected to something that is having a major impact on that person's life. I just got bad news about my dad's medical condition. Something's happening with my brother, etc. It's a deeply personal thing, and they have now a coach that can support them and a space that they can talk into that they may not have anywhere else. They can't come to HR. They can't come to their, everybody else in their life is going to give them advice, tell them what to do. The coach is not going to do that. It's a safe haven for that person to talk about whatever's coming up for them. The piece about the metrics, the measurement, the progress, that falls back on the direct superior, the one that's going to see them on a day-to-day or weekly basis and see, are they making progress against A, B, and C objectives or not, and communicate that. The coach is not in a position and should not be in a position ethically to come back to you and say, okay, so this person is not even talking about A, B, and C. They don't want to do A, B, and C. They're talking about maybe leaving the organization or changing their jobs to another vertical within the organization because they're sick and tired of being in the IT area or the marketing area, the finance area, the supply chain area, whatever they happen to be in. That's not up to the coach to report, not the ethical professional coach. People that have not been trained and are not ethical, they'll tell you anything that you want. And it will destroy the relationship of coaching between you and this client and anybody else that goes, oh, geez, yeah, don't take on a coach because he or she reports it all back to HR and it goes into your file and it's permanent. And I've also seen that happen. And that still those organizations today are struggling with the concept of coaching, pure coaching, professional coaching, because it's been contaminated by not being totally 100% confidential. To your second question, you ask about, is it more impactful for an internal coach or an external coach? Again, we've trained lots of internal coaches that go back and actually professionally coach internally in their organization quite effectively. And they approach it as a, first of all, they don't coach everybody that comes to them, because that's not appropriate. They don't coach informally. Whoever stops by that day and says, hey, coach, I know you've gone professional coaching. Can I just ask you a couple of things and get into an area? They will not do that because they haven't set the foundation. They haven't set up a professional separate contract between them and that individual and say, when you come into this room, or we set up time to communicate, as coach and client, I am no longer the HR person. I'm no longer the person that's in charge of the high potential group that's being developed. I'm no longer that corporate entity. I am a professional coach, and you can talk about anything you want. It will be held strictly confidential, and it does not go into your record. There's no written documents that go into the company, digital database somewhere. That can be incredibly effective, again, if they hold the line of ethics as a coach, even though that they're working with people on the inside of the company. From a practical standpoint, or from reality standpoint, typically the CXO level, the CEO and the CXO level or board level members who also get coaching will not do it with somebody internally. They will not do it. They can't divulge what's really going on inside their head with somebody inside the company for fear of retaliation, getting undercut, having it come back to them in a way that's not appropriate. So the external coach is probably the only way that you're going to get a CXO level person to be coached. The coaches that we train will go back and work with high potentials. They will typically not work with someone that reports directly to them, but in a group, their cohort that goes through their batch, there's been a lot of trading. Okay, so you take my direct reports, there's 3 or 4 people here that I would love to have coach, but I don't want to coach them. The the ICF goes so far as to say you can't even count those as coaching hours because there's just too many too many entanglements. So Amrita, you're in my class. Why don't you coach these 3 people and I'll coach 3 of your people. And there's a separation of, neutrality. That works really well. The internal coach will work with people that that are attracted to you professionally and that you're attracted to them. So in the old days, I might have gone to a young person in my organization and say, yeah, I really like your style. I like your enthusiasm. I like your passion. If you ever have any questions and you'd like some mentoring, stop by my office. Right. And that's actually happened. And I did the same thing when I was a younger executive. And, I'd go into Tom's office and, Tom, do you have 15 minutes? I just need some mentoring around this issue that's coming up. But again, coaching is much more formal than that, and not just drop by for 15 minutes casually. It's contracted, even if it's internal, and it'll stay confidential. So does that answer your question, Nina?
Yeah, it does. It does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great questions.
And I'm going to, get Lina's attention like this is quite rare. So I'm going to share with Lina the other aspect that everything that Peter has said is, I think, the process of coaching and the role that the coach plays through that whole process is to hold that space of confidentiality, but also be that facilitator of discussion. So yes, there is review. Yes, there is feedback. Yes, there is a celebration of the progress made. Yes, there's a metrics. All of that is part of the coaching journey. But the coach is just facilitating that. The deliverer of that news, whether it is what that objectives are or what the feedback is something that happens between the sponsor, the HR person, and the person being coached. But it's built into that system of coaching, and that's the balance that a professional coach will play between confidentiality and transparency. And it's joyful to be able to do that in an organization. Yeah.
Sure.
And last but not the least, in terms of many questions, I know there's some more questions in the chat box, as well as some people who've emailed me. I will respond to those to the best of my ability, so that you have your questions answered. But we've reached the top of the hour, so I'm going to respect that time as well. And really thank you, Peter, for making the time to be here and share with all these prospective coaches. And I really do hope that sometime you find your way to one of our coach training programs. And, if not, we're still always connected. So I look forward to meeting you, interacting with you, and seeing you in one of our learning circles. Till then, I'll say good night and thank you everyone for being here. And thank you especially, Peter, for making the time to do this. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night, India.